Okay, so you know what series I want to read? Let's talk about the books. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today's video is the what books or the 10 books that I want to read in 2024 video. We've already talked about the series, so if you do want to go and check out what series I'll be picking up next year, the card will be up above for you there. Before we jump into this list, make sure you check in the description box down below for links to my social media and Discord should you want to come along for the ride. Now, these 10 books are all over the genre spectrum. And I will say that whilst my series was mainly indie based, the books that I want to get to are mainly all traditionally published, with the exception of one, I believe. And we even have like a coffee table book in here that I saw at a bookshop, and I just was fascinated by what was inside, so I want to read it cover to cover. So we've got a little bit of a mix in here. As a fantasy and sci-fi reader, I tend to read a lot of series. I know a lot of us go into the same boat where we just get stuck into, 40, 50 series at any given time. I'm no exception to that, and I do prefer reading series personally. I like getting my teeth really sunk into a big story in a big world, but there are some books that I do want to read. Now, if there are any books that are part of series in the list that I'm going to talk about today, I am just planning on reading the first book in 2024, unless I happen to be able to read 300 books in the year, which hasn't happened yet. So I'd love it to happen, but it just hasn't. So without any further ado, without any sort of rhyme, reason, or structure to this list, let's jump into the 10 books that I want to read in 2024. The first one on this list, and one that's been coming up quite a bit recently again, is The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. I don't know how to pronounce it. This book has been on my radar for a little while now. I really quite like historical fiction, but I don't read a whole lot of it. This has been on a lot of top 10, even like top 5 historical fictions. I had the 25th anniversary edition. It's very beautiful. Don't look at the spine. It's a little bit old. I found it at a secondhand bookshop. I know this is technically a series now. I think there's 4 books with a 5th book coming out in 2025 or 2024. I'm not sure, but they can all be read as standalone. So I'm just planning on reading the first one. I do have this scheduled for quite late in 2024, but I'm very much looking forward to reading this one. If I like it, I might go ahead and pick up the rest of the series in 2025. Who knows? But that is the first book that I'm looking at picking up. The next one I have is a classic, and it's one that I think a lot of people tried to read last year, and then a couple people tried to read it this year. I'm going to be reading it in 2024, and that is The Count of Monte Cristo here. I've got this nice leather-bound edition. I really love these editions of the classics here. I've got a few of them in Perth. I bought this one to this house with me thinking that I would read it this year. It just didn't happen. It is a chonker of a book. Now, with classics, I tend to retain them better on audio, so I'll probably be doing an immersion read for this one. And again, I think I've got this one scheduled for quite late. It may even be an October read for spooky season. I'm not really sure when I've got it on there, but I know it's on the list for 2024. So I do want to read that one. I quite enjoy classics. They take me longer to read, and I like doing them on audio, and I haven't read that many of them. One of my favorite books of all time is a classic, and it's The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. It's still one of my favorite books that I've ever read, and I think the commentary in it is still very relevant to today's society, so I'm interested in reading more classics. So I'm going to give The Count of Monte Cristo a go. Actually maybe two carryovers from this year, which I didn't get to, is the first one is Tigana by Guy Gavriel Kay. This is an author that keeps coming up, and the more people talk about Guy Gavriel Kay, the more I think this author's writing is really going to jive with me. I really admire a lot of the people who admire Guy Gavriel Kay. So Tigana has been on my list for a little while now. I picked this up for $1 at like a used book sale thing, and I look at it all the time. It's one of those books on my shelf that goes, read me, please, pick me up. You bought me for a reason. And then I just haven't done it. So I want to read this one. It's on the schedule next year. So everyone, thoughts and prayers for me to finally read this book, because it's been on this list for 2 years now. The next one I want to pick up is a Stephen King. I used to be a constant reader of Stephen King. So Stephen King and VC Andrews, or Virginia Andrews, depending on what books you've picked up, really were the two authors that got me into reading as a high schooler. Um, in terms of sort of horror, maybe some more contemporary stuff. And I just haven't read Stephen King for a while. I think the last thing I read was last year, and that was Revival, and I quite liked it. I think I read The Colorado Kid last year as well, but I haven't read anything in 2023, so I do want to read at least one in 2024, and that is going to be 11/22/63. This comes highly recommended by a few people, a few constant readers of Stephen King, who just really like his writing. I actually love Stephen King's writing a whole lot. I don't think he's the be all and end all of horror writing, but what I do think King does well is slice of life. And with these big chunky books, you know you're going to get a bit of slice of life. And I quite like the slow burn that happens there. I actually don't hate a lot of Stephen King endings. I think they're his weakest point because he hates writing them. He said it himself. But I haven't hated many. I just think they're weaker than the rest of the story. But I've heard some good things about this one. I'm hoping to get Esme to read this one with me, so I've got a buddy, because Stephen King does tend to read a lot slower for me. The last one that I have physically before I jump into putting pictures on the screen, and one that arrived today, is Mary by Nat Cassidy. I have been, speaking of horror and horror authors, I've been wanting to read Nat Cassidy since this came out. This book is not in audio, it's not in ebook format, and it was horrendously expensive for an Amazon book to get to Australia. So I was waiting for it to go on sale. It dropped $10 last week, and I was like, I'm just going to get it here. Even if I have to ship it to Perth because it won't fit in the car, I'm just going to pick it up. This is apparently psychologically horrific. All I really know about it is that it's following a woman who is going through some stuff, and the doctors are just telling her that it's in her head and it's premenopausal. And I think that it's such an interesting commentary after what my wife has been through, going through some stuff, and doctors just going, no, you're X or you're Y, you're not really that way. And it's such an interesting thing that medical professionals can still do that and can still dictate what does and does not happen to a woman's body in 2023. So I think this has got some interesting commentary. I've heard wonderful things about Nat Cassidy's writing. I'm interested in Nestlings as well, which is another book that's come out by this author, but I'm definitely interested in picking this one up first. And the cover is gorgeous. I thought this was a photo. It's actually a painting in the background here, and it looks stunning. So interested in the commentary on that one, and I think that's something that horror does quite well, is break down social commentary, and it's a topic that I'm quite interested in. So that is one I'm looking forward to picking up, hopefully sooner rather than later. Moving on to the books that I don't have here physically, this next one is a memoir by Sharon Gless, and it's called Apparently There Were Complaints. If you don't know who Sharon Gless is, she is an Emmy award-winning actress. She's been in Hollywood for the last 5 decades. I came across her when she played Debbie in Queer as Folk, the American version that started in 2000. I was always drawn to her character as a mother who was supportive of her gay son and very loud and proud in that space. When I learnt that she basically stopped, she was on Broadway or some play, and she wanted to be in the show. So she wanted to be in it so badly to be part of the movement that the show was doing in the early 2000s, coming off the AIDS crisis and whatnot. And she basically just made herself get to this thing and to do this part, and she did it so very well. I have such mad respect for Sharon Gless for doing that and what she's done for the queer community that I really do want to read this book. I bought it when it came out. I pre-ordered it 12 months in advance. It's in a box in Perth, and I'm definitely going to be reading this one next year. Sort of keeping up with some queer vibes, I would also love to read the only indie that I have on this list for books I want to read next year, and that is the Wings of Ashtaroth by Steve Hugh Westenra. I recently had the pleasure of talking to Steve on an episode of The Queer Corner. I'm very interested in his writing. I think it could be really beautiful, the exploration of topics that he does, and knowing that he's like got a doctorate in monsters is so friggin' cool. But this one says, set in a secondary world based on the conflict between the ancient Carthage and Rome, The Wings of Ashtaroth is a sprawling multi-POV epic fantasy full of queerness, political intrigue, and demons. And that, to me, sounds bloody wonderful. So I am very intrigued by Steve's writing, and I'll be looking forward to getting to that one. The next one I have is, like I said earlier, this one's a bit of a coffee table book, and I went to a bookshop with my wife not long ago, and I just saw it there. Coffee table books are notoriously expensive because they're full of art, and the art in this book, I was staring at a piece of art for so long that Rach was like, "Are you coming at all today?" So when I move, I am going to order this book, not as a coffee table book, maybe as a reference, maybe as research for writing, but it's called The Art of Darkness, A Treasury of the Morbid, Melancholic, and Macabre, number 2. I think there's a series of these, and it is a coffee table book. So it's a source book featuring eclectic artworks from throughout history, which have been inspired and informed by the morbid, melancholic, and the macabre. I love art. I know sweet FA about art. Very much like how I like historical fiction, but I can't remember anything that happens in actual history. I really like going to art galleries. I like going to art shows. I like talking to the artists about what's going through their head as they create these pieces. I'm not one for stuff in the house. Like, I don't have a house full of artwork, but I do like going and experiencing it. So there was something about this book which is really called to me. It's only about 200 pages and it's full of artwork, and I really want to read it cover to cover and just see what I can discover, see what I can be inspired by in here. The last two I have are definitely more of like classic contemporary vibes, and the first one is just a mere curiosity, and that is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Now, I've heard from a lot of people that love horror, they don't love this book, and the reason is that it's just a slow burn psychological book where nothing happens in this house. I love slow burn psychological books where nothing happens. It makes me realize that I need to read House of Leaves at some point in my lifetime. I don't know why I like this so much. I just like this exploration. I think this is an exploration of the house. The house becomes obsessed with one of the people in there. I'm not sure. I haven't actually read the blurb. I don't know a great deal about it. I've never watched the show, but I'm very curious about Shirley Jackson's writing, so I'm going to be picking this one up at some point next year. The next one is also a suspense novel, and this is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Du Maurier is another one of those authors that I think is really going to click with me. I love suspense. I like psychological contemporary horror, and I think that Du Maurier does suspense in a way that, at least I've heard, is very accessible and very enjoyable. I really love the 1940s adaptation of Rebecca done by Alfred Hitchcock, and this is back in the day where Laurence Olivier played the main actor in it. This is one I do like a lot of Hitchcock movies. People probably don't know that about me, but I like older movies. I don't watch a whole lot of movies, but I did study it for a little while, and I've actually been part of a film set before. So quite fascinated in the story behind that, which is why I've chosen Rebecca. I actually own a few Daphne du Mauriers behind me, which are not the Rebecca, but I'm going to be starting off with that one. So those are the 10 books that I want to read in 2024. What are you picking up? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like the content, give it one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will, and I will catch you in the next video. Ciao.